This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, time is of the essence more than ever in the intel community.
Speed is life, but I think that the corroboration piece and accuracy can't be overstated either.
Former NGA Director Vice Admiral Trey Whitworth, U.S. Navy retired, on Fed Gov Today in just a moment. Uniting program strategy, advanced technology, process, and execution for a more efficient government. That's Maximus. Every program, every service, every time. That's innovation forward. Learn more at maximus.com/federal. A programming note, the Fed Gov Today TV will debut at a new time starting this Sunday morning. You can see the new show Sunday morning at 10 a.m. on ABC 7 in Washington and on YouTube. The new show's on the American Forces Network several times throughout the weekend. If you record the show and watch it later, make sure you change the recording time to 10 a.m. Sunday morning on ABC 7. If you miss the debut, you can watch it on demand on the Fed Gov Today YouTube channel and at fedgovtoday.com. Intelligence leaders across government say they're using more open source intelligence sources than ever. That usage isn't limited to the Pentagon. Vice Admiral Frank Whitworth, U.S. Navy retired, is former director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Trey, it's great to see you again. I sent you a note last week with a link to this article from Small Wars Journal. It was titled "The End of Battlefield Secrets, Addressing the OSINT Gap in U.S. Special Operations." When you were at NGA, you and I had a number of conversations about how you're using open source. And I thought that title, the reason I sent it to you was because the title was rather provocative, "The End of Battlefield Secrets." What's the implication of that way of thinking, at least, without getting into the specifics of the article, about the way that people might be thinking about open source intelligence moving forward? Welcome, Trey.
Thanks, Francis. It's great to be with you. And I agree. It was fascinating to receive the article from you and to see the end of battlefield secrets, which gets to the crux of your question. And I think one thing, if I were to have a discussion with Mr. Martin, Jared Martin, I don't know him, but I love his energy. And I love the fact that he's really, really passionate about the viability of our mission, especially for Special Operations Forces. But I would ask him if he is possibly deriving classification just from the sourcing as opposed to the overall content. This is something that I've noticed over my career, that some folks, especially if they have a little bit of experience in collection, not a lot of experience in analysis, that they believe that it's the collection source that drives classification. And I'm quick to remind everyone that sometimes there are secrets that might be in that open source that need to stay secret. And that's the art of analysis and the art of corroboration. So content, there are things we don't want our enemies to know about ourselves. And there are things about our enemies that we know that we don't want them to know we know. And so sometimes it's content as well. There's a lot of discussion about sourcing in this particular article.
What does this concept and what does this discussion mean, in your view, for the broader conversation about incorporating open source intelligence into the other sources and the other pieces of data that decision makers have? I take you back to a conversation that you and I had while you were still at NGA, where you said, "I want it all." And a mentor of yours, you told me, corrected you after that and reworded your statement there, Trey.
That's right. Because what he was actually trying to get across, and I probably did not memorize it correctly, he said, "I want everything," as opposed to all, because he finds it a bit of a fallacy to assume that you're going to be able to get it all. But the point is germane. We want everything in this business. And so I think, to get to your question, and kind of a cultural, bias that I'm hearing, or at least reading when I read Mr. Martin's piece, I think there is a bit of a myth that traditional intelligence analysts in the community actually are resistant to OSINT. And I'm here to recalibrate everyone on that, because we do want everything. We want to know if we can actually get to and render understanding that is accurate. And so if OSINT is first to the blackboard, and we can actually say with confidence to a commander or to a decision maker, that this is true and this is our level of confidence, then we're happy. And so that's one thing I think is really important, is that everyone is seeking for just more and more in the art of corroboration, especially in validation. He's a bit resistant to validating and taking the time, but let's review the fact, at least some of the facts and some of the stakes of being incorrect. In military intelligence, this isn't a passing fancy. Rendering understanding could actually account for losing, your forces. For their encountering some danger, or for strategic mistakes in the case of, say, kinetic operations.
What are the changes that you've seen over time in the way that people view OSINT and the way that they use it to make decisions?
So I do think that there might be a tendency for an old schooler, quote unquote, to think that OSINT is actually dated. Whereas someone who's new to the business goes to OSINT first. And I think the balance is key. I'm going to tell you right now that every single morning that I was director of one of our major intelligence agencies, every single morning began with a review of the press. And I don't apologize for that. In fact, I embrace that fact. And I would mentor anyone in the community to always scan the press. It's such an important, and now it's not just the press, it's social media, it's everything that's available digitally. And that's a great point that Mr. Martin's making, is that, he's kind of agreeing, you need everything. Mm. It's a very good queuing device, especially in places where you don't have that many resources otherwise. And I will draw on my experience as the Director of Intelligence at United States Africa Command. That is a huge continent. There are a lot of problems and a lot of things we need to render understanding to our commander and to other combatant commanders. And I will tell you right now, we were wholly dependent on OSINT sometimes as the first indicator that there's something else we need to explore. So it's a balance.
I was struck by one of the pieces that I saw when I was doing some searches to get ready to talk to you, referred to using social media information in an operation in Syria last summer. And it struck me that we've really come to a different place when it regards this information, because first of all, there are three things that I took away from that struck me as very different than when I began in this space talking to people like you and learning about the way that different organizations use intelligence. One was that, in that period of time, social media didn't really exist in the way that it exists today. So it wouldn't have been considered even a place to go at all, because it wasn't a place to go at all. Second thing is that someone at some point considered that information decisionable. And then the third thing was that the Department of War was willing to talk about it as a place where they went to find decisionable information. This was not, some investigative reporting that somebody found this fact that nobody wanted them to find. It's just kind of the way of tradecraft today.
I think you make an important point. Most intelligence analysts and obviously most decision makers want to disseminate as much as they can. And so sometimes the sourcing, and when it beautifully aligns with the content, allows you to have that conversation, you embrace that. And there have been times, and I think that this is a relatively new construct, as you suggest. There have been times where the availability in commercial platforms or in publicly available platforms allow us to have a conversation that we otherwise did not have or didn't used to have. And so I think that there has been, some embracing of OSINT just to have a communication, not only with ourselves domestically, but also with our international partners.
How necessary is defining the term open source intelligence for either a particular application, a particular usage, or more broadly for the community as a whole? And what I'm thinking of is, you and I chat a little bit before we turn the recorder on. If I look at Google Maps, I guess technically, if I really wanted to dress it up, I could say that I consulted open source intelligence. That's different maybe in somebody's mind than if I used information that I bought from a commercial source, but that was available to anybody. Or maybe it's not different. Maybe those are both legitimate open source intelligence pieces, and maybe I'm trying to put too fine of a point on it. Am I thinking about it too hard, Trey?
So I think definitions are part of the discussion, the dialogue that's going on right now about OSINT. And I would offer that we probably shouldn't get too bogged down on it, but there are times, and you're citing one, there are times that you actually need parameters. And when it comes to some of the things that we hold dear in the intelligence community as Americans, like intelligence oversight, the fact that, by executive order, we're not going to spy on Americans, we're not going to image America unless it is formally requested in a legitimate request from an agency. You need something that helps you keep those parameters. This definition that at least most people are going through right now of exclusively publicly or commercially available information is in a way helpful, because then you know where you stand. If it's exclusively commercially or publicly available, then it's OSINT. And if you can have it in some other way, then perhaps that falls under traditional intelligence. So for people who make their living doing this and respecting the executive order, I think it might help at least be communicative with them.
And one of the reasons I think that's important is because I imagine that goes to how then one rates the credibility of a piece of information, or how one rates the confidence that one has in applying that piece of information to making a decision. And I wonder how that changes then in an era of spoofing and AI fakes, deep fakes, and that kind of thing, Trey.
So you're going to the issue of validation. And in this article, there's a bit of an allusion to validation equals time taking and delays and that kind of thing. What I would offer is an optimistic kind of spin on what Mr. Martin's concerned about is, well, in an age of artificial intelligence, we may actually be able to get that corroboration much faster, which is effectively validation. You're right. We need to validate things that might be visually generated and are not true. We need to know that. And in this day and age of AI and the direction it's moving, the speed it's moving, we may actually be pretty speedy on corroboration. So I'm buoyed by that. And I think he should be too.
I mentioned AI, and you and I talked about AI in our last conversation when you were at NGA. And that, by the way, is linked in the archives at fedgovtoday.com. And we'll put a link to that in today's show notes too, so people could go back and listen to that. But you talked about how artificial intelligence is impacting the intelligence community broadly, but OSINT in particular. What have you seen now that you've had a chance to be outside the building and see what see a different view of how artificial intelligence tools can both evolve in and of themselves and evolve the way that people use open source? What do you see in that area now, Trey?
I see nothing but growth, and I'm very excited about it. I think that this is such a worthy topic because corroboration is the coin of the realm here. To render understanding, you better make sure it's actually proper understanding. And so while corroboration used to be a bit of an art form and still requires some element of judgment and research, and there's still a bit of a manual piece to it, the speeds that we're going to be able to generate, I'm very, very excited about. And I think the rest of the community would agree. And you're hearing this both from the Department of War as well as the IC. We need to embrace the new technology and move out.
Yeah, everybody wants everything, like you said earlier, and they want it faster than they've ever had it before. Is that a fair add-on to your mentor statement, do you think?
Speed is life. But I think that the corroboration piece and accuracy can't be overstated either.
Congratulations to you, by the way, because I understand that you've really taken this artificial intelligence concept to heart and you're going to incorporate it into your next steps.
Well, thank you for that. It is true. In fact, this is new information this week. We've made the leap. I've made the leap, and so has R4 Technologies. They have established a new position. I've accepted it as the president for national security at R4 Federal, which is the federal component of R4 Technologies. And that's exciting. This is a values-based decision for me because they started with things like aligning food supply and food security, supply chains, et cetera, and now are moving into that federal space that will involve some of the things we talked about today, which could involve supply chains, could involve certainly the intelligence world and national security world. And so I'm really excited about this.
Well, congratulations on it. I look forward to hearing more about your role as it develops, and it's always great to talk to you. I appreciate your insight, my friend.
Thank you, Francis. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
You can read more about using open source intel and find a link to the article Trey and I talked about on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Don't forget, Fed Gov Today TV will debut at a new time this Sunday morning. You can see the new show Sunday morning at 10 a.m. on ABC 7 in Washington and on YouTube. If you missed the debut, you can watch it on demand on the Fed Gov Today YouTube channel and fedgovtoday.com. The next Fed Gov Today podcast is tomorrow. I'm Francis Rose. I'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening.